This is Apropos. Well, the three-day visit comes as Paris seeks to expand its military partnership with New Delhi. The French president has touched down in India for talks expected to focus on a potential multi-billion-euro fighter jet deal. Emmanuel Macron will also be attending a summit on artificial intelligence. Well, with more on what to expect, here's Jenny Shin.
It's the French president's fourth official visit to India, aimed at deepening strategic ties in the Indo-Pacific. First on the agenda for Emmanuel Macron, attending a global AI summit in New Delhi alongside Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
The AI Impact Summit will enrich global discourse on diverse aspects of AI, such as innovation, collaboration, responsible use, and more.
The trip comes as Macron positions France as India's key technology and security partner, as both countries seek to reduce economic dependencies on China and navigate an increasingly uncertain economic landscape created by Donald Trump. New Delhi and Paris will aim to advance their so-called Horizon 2047 roadmap, a bilateral promise to expand collaboration in areas ranging from nuclear energy to high-tech manufacturing. Defense will also be a key talking point. France is already one of India's leading arms suppliers, with India set to purchase $39 billion worth of defense equipment, including more Rafale jets for the Indian Air Force. New Delhi has steadily sought to reduce its dependence on its traditional supplier Russia over the past decade, instead increasing imports from France, Israel and the United States.
Well, for more on the visit and just what exactly is at stake, we're joined here in studio by political scientist Christophe Jaffrelot, Research Director at the CNRS and President of the French Political Science Association. Thanks so much for being with us this evening. We do appreciate your time for coming into studio as well. Christophe, let's talk about what is potentially on the cards during this visit. You've described this potential deal when it comes to French fighter jets as the contract of the century. We're hearing that it could be worth up to 30 billion euros. Just tell us, why is it so significant?
Well, it is very significant because it is the culminating point of a very long collaboration. And when you become so close, when you have so much at stake, you're bound to remain partners. India will never have allies, but partners for sure, for a long time. So yes, it's an important moment, especially if in this deal there is a transfer of technology, and this is what we will know very soon, because India needs to build its own fighter jets at the end of the day, if not the day, the century, hopefully. For that, they need transfer of technology. And this contract, this deal, may include new kinds of transfers of technology. This is what has to be watched, in addition to the magnitude of the deal.
And historically speaking, India, it has very close ties with Russia when it comes to military equipment. Do you think Europe, and particularly France, is well placed to potentially replace Moscow?
Yes, in this domain at least. Fighter jets are very well appreciated. The Rafales has been sold now to so many countries, including Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE. But of course, there are others. There are other weapons, including submarines. Scorpions were sold by France to India as well. So it may not be only in this domain, but whatever the domain, to emancipate itself from dependency vis-à-vis Russia is one of India's priorities. So till the end of USSR, it was something like 80% of the weapons that India had, which were coming from Russia. We are now at 40% or so. And France, Israel, the US are helping, Germany are helping India to diversify.
And do you think that this deal, you're saying that Russia and India, New Delhi is trying to disassociate itself to some degree, but Russia is still one of India's main trading partners, isn't it? So do you think there's going to be a caveat when it comes to this deal, Emmanuel Macron putting the pressure on New Delhi here to row back from those ties with Russia?
India will have to find some ways to compensate vis-à-vis Russia, because the idea is not to weaken Russia, is not to sever the links with Russia. Russia has to remain a very important partner for India. India wants a multipolar world. Russia has to be one of these poles. The EU, another one, of course, to resist China, and now to resist the US. But of course, Russia may be pissed off, may be very much pissed off by this decision, if it is at the expense of buying more equipment from Russia. So most probably India will buy more S-400, which are very effective earth-air missiles. The question that remains is the Russian oil, because India has been told by Donald Trump to stop buying Russian oil. Apparently it is stopping buying Russian oil, and that may be even more complicated for Moscow, because Moscow needs this kind of money. But the Europeans are not supposed to put pressure on India on that ground.
In public, in any case, what happens behind closed doors, perhaps another question. You mentioned, Christophe, the US there. This visit, Emmanuel Macron's visit to India, it comes not long after New Delhi signed that trade deal with Europe. So given the wider geopolitical context here, how necessary is it for India, for the EU, to start forging these other ties that perhaps it traditionally might have had more so with the United States?
Yes, definitely this rapprochement between India and the EU is also a reaction to the way the EU and India are treated by Donald Trump. India, the EU have been at the receiving end of trade deals, of course, also very bad manners regarding Greenland, regarding also Chabahar. You know, India has been asked by Donald Trump to stop investing in Chabahar, a very important deep sea port in Iran that India needs to relate to Afghanistan, to contain Pakistan. So these two middle powers, the EU, India, in this context, vis-à-vis a new America, have come together economically in trade relations, and now militarily in terms of arms sales.
And Chinese influence also, that's another issue kind of close to both leaders' hearts. Do you think that's going to weigh heavily on these talks as well?
It plays a role. It plays a role in two ways. One, very important, the Indo-Pacific. France and India are, of course, very much cooperating in the Indian Ocean. France is a resident power in the Indian Ocean, with La Réunion Island, with Mayotte, with Djibouti also. And India, of course, like France, is fearful of China expanding its influence in this part of the world because of Sri Lanka's deep sea port built by China, because of also the Maldives, because of Djibouti again, because there is a Chinese military base in Djibouti. So that's one very important area for cooperation, the Indo-Pacific in the Indian Ocean. And then, of course, there is another China factor, that is, how do you emancipate yourself from the supply chain that is coming from China? And France and the EU are in France and the EU and India are more or less in the same situation. How do we diversify for the semiconductors, for the medicines? India is supposed to be the pharmacy of the world. Yes, for the generics, but most of the ingredients they need to export their generics come from China. So again, middle powers joining hands in order to resist not only the US, but also China economically. And in fact, this is why the AI is so important, because as this domain is again monopolized or dominated by the G2, China and the US, and they need to resist these middle powers. And by pooling their resources, Europe and India may resist more effectively.
And how significant do you think it is that India is hosting this summit, the first developing country, if we can use that term, to do so?
Yeah, that's very important. Well, India is good at services. IT is the most important sector of the economy, the most modern sector of the economy. And in fact, India is exporting services almost as much as goods, which is really remarkable for an emerging country. IT has something to do with AI. The IT big champions of India, Tata, Infosys, Wipro, big companies based in Bangalore, most of them, are investing in AI. And of course, on the French side, we also have some licorns, some good companies, Mistral and Co. So the idea is probably to make these companies work together more in order to innovate. Innovate is key in this domain, and these countries do not innovate sufficiently. R&D, research and development expenditures, are very weak compared to the kind of R&D China and the US are doing. So again, pooling resources, working together, investing together, innovating together may be a solution. Whether they'll do it remains to be seen. You can't twist the arms of private companies, but at least the governments try to push them in this direction.
And do you think they'll be coming under pressure as well, the tech giants, to kind of become more accountable? Because we had a similar summit in Paris last year, and the US side agreed to sign up to any of those calls for greater accountability from the tech giants.
They will revisit these issues, accountability, privacy, the surveillance question. Number one, yes, the big players in the US are not there. I mean, if they are there, they may not agree to sign anything. So if they're not on board, really, it is really meaningless. Secondly, so far as surveillance is concerned, privacy is concerned, India is not as, I would say, particular about human rights than the EU. And for instance, the kind of personal data protection that we have in Europe is not there in India. And the EU was hopeful, very hopeful, that the kind of model the EU represents in terms of personal data protection would be adopted by India, and it is not the case. India is now more a surveillance state, somewhat a police state, and there we diverge, but we will not speak about it anyway.
So there's a lot that we won't actually know what will be happening behind the scenes. But Christophe, can I just ask you finally, how much of a priority has India been for Emmanuel Macron? As we hear, this is his fourth visit since he came to office in 2017.
It has been a very important priority. First of all, because the Indo-Pacific is certainly his work, personal work. Over 10 years, almost 10 years, he has been pushing the Indo-Pacific agenda. Remember, 2018, for the first time in Australia, he says the Indo-Pacific is where things happen. We want to be there. India was in the Indo-Pacific along with Australia, but Australia went the AUKUS way, along with Japan, and we are still close to Japan. But India was, along these two others, a very old partner of France. 1982, Mitterrand goes to Delhi and sells the first fighter jets. 82, many, many decades ago. And then 1998, Jacques Chirac goes to Delhi and signed the first strategic partnership with India. So Macron is capitalizing on something that is really now very solid and robust, but in the context of the Indo-Pacific becoming his priority. So the two things superposed, coinciding, explain why we are here today, and India needing to diversify, needing good weapons to resist Pakistan, to resist China in a very conflictual context. I think these are the elements explaining that the rapprochement is still going on.
A lot at stake then over the next 3 days. We'll be watching closely. Christophe, thanks so much for coming into us. We'll have to leave it there for now. Christophe Jaffrelot, Research Director at the CNRS. Thank you.